All right. I'm staying here. I'm not going anywhere, just so
Good.
you know.
Okay.
All right.
Well, hi, TikTok people and Thompson Ferrier family. Waiting to go have people join. I'm so excited to be here tonight. And I'm Sue Phillips, and I have been invited by Rafi to talk to you all about fragrance, wonderful ideas, educational products, and different aspects of perfume that I would love to share with you. And if you have questions, of course, put them in the chat. I will do my best to answer them. So I see a lot of people are joining. I'm happy to see you all. For those who just came on, I'm Sue Phillips. I have been in the fragrance industry for many years, and I love perfume. I love to talk about it. I love to explain to people the different aspects of perfumery, and look forward to hearing from you in the chat. And Rafi is also going to be talking to me. So it's a beautiful day here. I'm actually in Sarasota. I lived in New York for many years with different companies, Elizabeth Arden, Lancome, and Tiffany, and I relocated to Sarasota in September, and it's a gorgeous sunny day. So I'm sorry if you're cold, everybody, and I know you've had a really bad winter, but I certainly hope that spring is on its way. And we're talking about fragrance today, and when I see some questions, I'll certainly ask you to write them. So I'm here to talk about perfume. I'm here to talk about all the different aspects of perfumery, things that you may know, things that you may not know, and I'm going to be your fragrance guide for the next 2 hours. And we're just waiting for some people to come on at around 6 o'clock, and I look forward to speaking to you all. So I'm sure all of you have your own favorite fragrance to wear. So somebody asked me, what's my favorite men's cologne, and what's your favorite men's cologne, and why is it Creed Aventus? Well, I didn't say it was Creed Aventus. I actually loved the original Lagerfeld for men. It was a beautiful Shalimar type fragrance, and was very smooth, very sensual in the spicy Oriental family. So I think that there are so many colognes that are lookalikes and smell-alikes, and I like things that are more original. So that's the fragrance that I happen to like. I like a man's fragrance in an Oriental spicy category rather than a very fresh citrusy. Although fresh and citrus is nice, it's really good. I mean, the fresh category is it's one of the best categories. Light, bright citrus, exuberant, vital, very, very uplifting, and that's great for men and women. So for those of you who are coming in, I see we have about 155 people. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here tonight. My name is Sue Phillips, and I'm delighted to be part of this Thompson Ferrier team. And for the next 6 weeks, I'll be talking to you about fragrance. Oh, here's somebody who says, I'm close to you, Tampa. Oh, that's wonderful. I was in Tampa on Friday night, and I was at a wonderful party there. So I will be coming back to Tampa. So what I'd like to do is just start at the very, very beginning. For those of you who are here, it's 6 o'clock. And so perfume spans thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It has an incredible heritage and a history. And it really started because of sacred religious rituals. You know, today we wear perfume and we put it on and we spray it on and we dab it on. And we wear it for ourselves to smell good, to feel good, for our loved ones, to be attractive to people. But perfumery really started in the ancient Egyptian rituals as a sacrifice to the gods. And it was always about sacred rituals as opposed to sensual wearing. And what they would do is they would put on an altar all the elements that they wanted to offer to the gods. And then they would actually burn it. And through the aromas wafting through the smoke came the word perfume. So the actual word perfume comes from the Latin perfumum, which means through smoke. And because the smoke wafted up through the air when they burnt all those elements to make sacrifices to the gods, that's how the word perfume came about. How many of you know that? I'd love to see some hearts if you knew that word. That perfume comes from the Latin perfumum, which means through smoke. Does anybody know that?
You know, I didn't. I'm here, guys. I'm just going to say
Hi,
hello
Rafi.
to everyone. But can you repeat it? Because I didn't catch that.
You didn't? Okay. All right. So the word perfume comes from the Latin perfumum, which actually means through smoke. Per meaning through, fumum, or in French it's fumer, smoke, through smoke. So in the ancient Egyptian rituals, they'd put on an altar all the elements that they wanted to offer to the gods, everything that they could find, the incense and just wonderful sort of iconic items that they wanted to offer to the gods. And then they would burn them. And through the smoke wafting into the air, they were able to smell the aromas from the wood and the incense and all those aspects. So that's how the word came to be, perfumum from the Latin, and we have now made it into perfume. But it came from the Latin meaning through smoke. So I hope you know that, and I hope you can remember that now. Rafi, do you remember that now?
Now I understand, which is why I know that the Arabs actually put the bahur inside of the white thing that they wear. They
Exactly.
put it underneath, and they make the smoke part of their ritual.
Exactly.
I did not know that.
Yes. Smoke is a very important part of the ritual. And I was in Morocco. I was in Egypt. I've been there twice. And one of the most amazing things that you smell in Morocco and the Middle East is this incredible smell of oud, incense, musk, and bahur. There was also an amazing fragrance centuries ago called kifi, and that's another aspect of Middle Eastern perfumery, kifi, which is a very strong, spicy fragrance, Kyphi. So I'm here to tell you about a lot of different things, and I'd love to see what comments there are. I'm getting hearts. Well, that's good. So from the Middle Ages, from Egypt, we go to the Middle Ages. And so in the Middle Ages, they also used perfumery for sacred religious ceremonies. So everything was always used for religious ceremonies. And in the Middle Ages, they had these beautiful thuribles, which are still found today in the Catholic Church, and they wave them backwards and forwards. So who knows what happened in the Middle Ages with fragrance? Let's see what somebody says. Sandra says, could that be why Middle Eastern women in her area, Michigan, wear a lot of fragrance? Yes, absolutely. They love to wear oud and musk and a lot of those very heavy fragrances. You know, I just want to say something to you. I've been in the fragrance industry for many years. I started my career at Elizabeth Arden in training, and then product development, and then marketing. And then Lancôme hired me as marketing director for fragrance and men's skincare. I was there for 4 years and helped really develop and expand Magie Noire, which is a beautiful chypre fragrance. And then I helped to develop Trésor. But before it was launched, I was hired by Tiffany to develop and launch the first Tiffany perfume. So if you'd have told me growing up in South Africa that one day I'd be executive vice president of Tiffany, I would say you're crazy, because it's an amazing story. But through my fragrance travels and through being in the fragrance industry for many years, and then I'll tell you about how I started my company, you know, different cultures like different fragrances, just the way different cultures like different foods. So in America, mostly people love to smell fresh and clean, and everything is citrus and everything is vibrant with a lot of citrus bergamot notes, and it's just a way of Americans love to really be fresh and clean, and I think that's why everything you see in the supermarkets and the shelves are lemon fresh and all that kind of stuff. So Americans love fresh and clean. The Europeans love florals. The English love lavender. The South Americans love spicy. And the Middle Eastern people love this heavy oud and the aromatic incense oud fragrances. So just the way cultures enjoy different foods, people enjoy different types of fragrances based on their culture. And I'm very happy here today to talk to you and to tell you about different aspects of fragrance. So one of the things that happened in the Middle Ages was, again, people used fragrance for religious ceremonies. And they would put fragrance, they would put galbanum, which is a very celeriac, it's like a green celery kind of a fragrance. It's very robust. And they would put galbanum and incense in this thurible, which is a sort of silver, very beautiful, decorated, ornamental, sculptured container on a chain, and they would swing it backwards and forwards, just the way they do in the Catholic Church today. And by swinging it backwards and forwards, that was a signal for sinners to come back to the church to repent. So all those bad sinners would be invited to come to the church through the beautiful aromas wafting through the air, and that would intrigue them, and that would invite them to come back to the church to repent. So even though fragrance was used for religious ceremonies, it was also used to entice people to stop being bad people, just stop being sinners. Did you know that, Rafi?
I had no clue. So I want to hear it one more time. I think I got it right. So the church used to put the fragrance so that the people can come back for the love of the fragrance and stop being sinners because they're in church.
Exactly. That was their call to come back to the church, because the fragrance would waft through the church and through the air. And I guess in a way it was almost like the original scent diffusion because we use a lot of fragrance in different areas for ambient scenting. But fragrance was really very important throughout the Middle Ages. And then, of course, we get to France. So France became known as the perfume capital of the world, but it really started mostly, obviously, in Egypt and then the Middle Ages. So why did France become the capital of perfumery? Does anybody know? I'd love to hear from you. Anybody have a clue why France became known as the capital of perfumery? Looking for your answers. No, not yet. Okay, would you like me to tell you?
You know, I'm Googling it, by the way.
I'm giving you a lot of information tonight, Rafi, right? And everybody, all your wonderful followers and all the people. We have 146 followers here tonight. We had more.
Well, I'm not going to say why Google is saying it, but I'm going to let you say it.
Okay. So there's a beautiful area outside of Paris called Grasse, Grasse. And I've been to Grasse many times. Have any of you been to Grasse? Grasse. The French pronounce it Grasse. Some Americans call it Grasse. So the light was beautiful. It was very light, and it stayed light for a long, long time, till 10 o'clock at night. And so as a result, everything was fertile. The land was fertile. It grew beautiful flowers and beautiful ingredients. And also, because the land was so fertile, there was a lot of cattle, and cows roamed through these beautiful fields of grass. in grass. And the farmers had to do something with the animal hides because they had all these cattle wafting, roaming around, and they had to do something with the hides. So they decided to soften the leather hides. But the chemicals used to soften the leather were so strong and so pungent, and they didn't smell good at all. But guess what? Because of all the fields of flowers, the jasmine and the rose and all those beautiful flowers that were growing because the light was so good and the ground was so fertile, they were able to come up with a way to make the cattle, the hides, the leather, soften it and smell so much better. And so they used certain techniques to really get the fragrance out of the flowers, out of the petals. So one of the techniques that they used was a technique called enfleurage, which is called it's just spelled enfleuarge, enfleurage. And what they would do is they would put on a layer of fatty wax, and they would go out early in the morning, like 4 or 5 in the morning, when the petals and the flowers were very redolent with beautiful oils and fragrant, and the dew from the grass would make it just beautiful. And they would take the petals and they would put all these petals on a bed of this fatty wax. And the petals would seep into the wax and into the fatty wax. And by a process of extracting the oil from the wax, they would come up with the beautiful actual rose, or the ingredients of the petals and the flowers. And they did this with roses, with lilies, with so many of the different flowers. And that was one of the techniques that were used to extract the beautiful perfume from the flowers. And that was used in the 18th century. Well, they don't use it anymore, but that was the forerunner of extracting the petals and the beautiful perfumes from the ingredients. And then there was another technology that they used, which was distillation, because certain ingredients and certain ingredients were a little bit bigger and weren't going to be used. They didn't have petals like the wood and some of these other ingredients, and they used distillation. They would put them in big kettles, really big kettles, and through the boiling of the water and extracting the oils from the ingredients, they would get the drops of the oils from these big kettles. And that's how they also got the ingredients, the actual essential oils. So all of these techniques were very, very interesting and were very, very successful to extract and distill oils. And that was the way that they did it in the 18th century. And that is the reason that France became known as the French capital of perfumery. So it was also where the Impressionists painted, because the light was so beautiful. And so it's so interesting how through necessity of trying to extract and distill these beautiful ingredients to create gorgeous perfumes, they were able to do it through various techniques. And today we don't use that. It was too expensive, and so they've now become, now we do headspace technology. A lot of fragrances are used with molecules as opposed to actual ingredients. So let's see. Rafi is here. Bob, Rafi's here. He's listening. So
I'm here, Bob. If you can, just so you know, I'm here in the background.
Rafi's here.
Can I ask you a question, Sue?
Sure.
One question. So, what was the correlation between the hide and the fragrance? Did they put the flowers on top of the hide and let the oil seep through?
I forgot to tell you. So what they did was they were able to make the leather smell better by taking some of the aromas from the flowers and mixing it with those chemicals to soften the leather. And that's how they were able to overcome those awful aromas, those awful smells of the heavy chemicals to soften the leather. And that is how the beautiful leather aroma came about. And they were able to just soften the leather with chemicals and make it smell better.
So what you were saying, and again, I'm trying to learn as well because I did not know this. You're saying that the origin, the reason people call Grasse, France, the origin of perfume,
Yes.
is because they had a problem they had to solve, which was the hide stunk. And to camouflage that, they put the oils in there and on top of it, and the aroma mixed with the leather, which is now why I understand why rose and leather and musk work so well together.
Right.
I get it now. And they solved their problem by camouflaging the fragrance of the hide.
And using,
like,
and using the natural ingredients to do that, because they had all these cattle, and obviously they were farmers. They had cattle, they were selling them, they were using them for food and that, but they didn't want to get rid of the hides. They didn't want to just toss it out. They knew that there was a way to actually utilize it. And in fact, that I think in the 18th century, one of the perfumers gave to Marie Antoinette, I believe, a pair of scented leather gloves. And that's where the expression walking hand in glove comes from. So one of the perfumes, I think his name was René something, really was the perfumer to the court, and he created these perfumed leather gloves, and he gave it to Marie Antoinette. I believe it was Marie Antoinette. And that's where the expression walking hand in glove comes from. Did you know that, Rafi?
I had no clue. I honestly, 3 for 3. Everything you're telling me, I had no idea.
Well, I'm glad, because actually in my book, The Power of Perfume, which I wrote, I have all these wonderful anecdotes and all these wonderful stories about fragrance. And it's such a labor of love. So we're going to now go from the Middle Ages to the early 1900s. And fragrance through the decades started my journey. In fact, when I wanted to write this book, I went all the way back. See, it says here, Grasse became the capital of the world. And actually what I forgot to tell you is that the Leather Guild of France was started because there was this foul odor and all those pungent chemicals. The tanners wanted to get rid of. And so that's why they extracted oils from the roses, the lavender, and the jasmine to get the oils from that. And that resulted in different technologies, the enfleurage, extraction, and distillation. So now we're going to go to Grasse, and I have to tell you a wonderful story. So I do have a lot of stories to tell. So I was in Grasse, and years before that, when I was at Elizabeth Arden, I became very friendly with one of the perfumers who'd created the Lagerfeld for Men fragrance. His name was Ron Winograd, and he had worked with another perfumer in France called Jean-Claude Helena. So when I went to Grasse, I contacted Jean-Claude. Now, Jean-Claude is now the perfumer to Hermès, and he's a wonderful perfumer. And they invited me to their home, and I had a wonderful time. But then we stopped in the library, and I was astounded to see about 400 first edition books of the play by Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot. And I couldn't believe how many books there were, the same book, Waiting for Godot, in beautiful leather bound and burgundy leather with gold writing. And I said, Jean-Claude, pourquoi? Why are there so many leather-bound books of Waiting for Godot? It turns out that Jean-Claude's wife is Samuel Beckett's niece. Her name is Susanna Beckett. So that was so exciting to first of all be at their home, to meet with Susanna and Jean-Claude, but to hear the story of Waiting for Godot, this play that Samuel Beckett had written. And they had all these magnificent leather-bound first edition books. So that was a great little story about my travels in grass.
May I ask you to do something again, real quick?
Sure.
Every so often, I think, Sue,
Yes.
some people here don't know who you are. Like once in a, maybe over a 2-hour period, you should reintroduce yourself like 3 or 4 times, just so that, because, we have, quite a bit of people who don't know who you are. And it would be nice for them to know your background, because it's quite impressive, I have to say.
Okay,
it's very impressive.
Well, thank you, Rafi. So, hi, everybody. Yes, I do tend to be a little bit, I explain a lot, and that is because I've been an adjunct professor at FIT, an adjunct professor at LIM, and the reason I was invited to become adjunct professor is because I started my career at Elizabeth Arden, but way back, I was born in South Africa. So I was born in South Africa, and I always wanted to be a singer and an actress. And at 10 years old, I was actually an actress in a play, like a Broadway type play called Roar Like a Dove. And that was really, I got the acting bug. And when I left school, I went to University of Cape Town to study acting at the UCT, University of Cape Town. And so when I graduated from Cape Town University, I went to London to study acting at RADA, Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. But that was in the late 70s, and people didn't like South Africa at the time because of the politics. And my mother had always said to me, if I'm going to be in theater, I should have something to fall back on. So I then came to America in 1976 for the bicentennial celebration. It was magnificent. Everything was alive and alert, and America was on holiday. And I said, you know what? I'm going to come to America. But I had to have a green card. I had to find a way to get here. So 7 months later, I came to America, and a friend of mine introduced me to an immigration attorney. And I went to see him. He said, what do you do? I said, I'm a singer and an actress. He said, forget that. We have thousands of out-of-work singers and actresses. We don't need another. What else do you do? I said, well, my mother always said I should have something to fall back on. So I had done a secretarial and a business course. And he said to me, well, were you any good? And by the way he asked me the question, I knew that was my ticket to America. And I said, yes. So he hired me. And I was able to, he processed my green card. At night, I go singing and acting. And at the end of the year, I went on a week's vacation, and I went on different job offers. One was to work in banking. I said, not for me. One was to work in fashion. At the time, I didn't know anything about fashion, but it's different now. And the third job offer was to work at Elizabeth Arden. And that's how I came to be in the cosmetic industry. I landed up working for the president of Elizabeth Arden, and I was his executive assistant, I guess his secretary. And every few weeks, every few months, we would have a chat, and I was singing and acting at night, so I would invite all the Ardenettes, I called them, to come to hear me sing and act. And one day he said to me, you know, Sue, you'd be great in training. I said, well, training what? He said, training the people behind the counter about fragrance. And that's how I started in fragrance. He said I had to go to Macy's to learn about fragrance, to learn who the customer was, how to talk to the customer, how to explain fragrances to the customer, and to understand the nuances of fragrance, selling, interacting with customers, and it was incredible. It was an amazing 3 months. I learned a lot, and then I started my career in training, and I would travel around the country doing training seminars. And this was the really start of how I became so passionate about fragrance. I would travel all over the country, and you know, New York is not America. Florida is not America. And I would travel all over to different places.
I'm sorry.
Are you laughing?
I need to laugh. I'm laughing because you're talking to me now. I think America is New York. You're right.
Well,
so you're right. You're absolutely right.
It was amazing because, again, different people have different likes and dislikes, and it was so interesting. And again, some of the stories. I was once in Dallas, and the salesperson in Dallas, whichever market I would go to, the salesperson or the territory manager would be setting up these training schools. And the training schools would be for the people behind the counter at all the stores to come and learn about fragrance. And at the time, Elizabeth Arden had Chloe and Lagerfeld and eventually Burberry. And I was the national training director, and I had to talk and explain and train the people behind the counter how to sell, how to talk about the fragrance, what the top notes were, which I'll explain to you, the fragrance concentration, the ingredients. And one night, so Rich was the territory manager of Dallas, and after a training school, whether it be a breakfast or a lunch or a dinner or a cocktail party, I traveled 90% of the year. I was on a plane every week. I was on a plane almost every day. I would do training schools in the morning for breakfast, then I'd fly to someplace else and do an afternoon cocktail party or an evening and be the next day. And literally for 2 years, I was on a plane traveling throughout the country, meeting people, talking to customers, doing in-store appearances. It was amazing. I loved it. I really did. But the travel got to me. And before I left the training, I would go to all these different places, and the sales manager, one time there was a Willie Nelson concert, and he said, "Sue, do you want to go to the Willie Nelson concert?" I said, "Absolutely." And we went backstage because somehow Rich had access to Willie Nelson's manager. So we went backstage, and I met Willie Nelson. He had a crinkled face, but the bluest eyes, and he had these beautiful blue eyes, which I'll never forget. So there was some lot of fun things too. But after Elizabeth Arden, then I went into Lancôme, and I was marketing director for fragrance for 2 years, and then I did a men's skincare line, and then I was lured and hired by Tiffany & Company to become their executive vice president of fragrance, and I developed the Tiffany perfume. So I'm moving away because the sun is so bright. Do you see the sun? I'm sorry for all of you people in New York with bad weather, but it's really sunny here. So that was my sort of background. The idea that I had worked with, was able to help develop and create the Tiffany perfume with a perfumer called Jacques Poge. Jacques Poge was an amazing perfumer, and one of these days I'll tell you that story in my next few sessions. But one of the things that I think it would be interesting for you to know is that having worked with all these perfumers and having worked with all these brands, fragrance is what I call the silent accessory. It's our strongest, most powerful, invisible accessory. It tells people who you are. It announces who you are before you even speak. And when you leave a room or a place, the fragrance lasts, and that is called a sillage. S-I-L-L-A-G. You know, when a motorboat goes full steam ahead in the ocean, you see the trail of the motorboat in the trail of the leaving the way in the wake of the in the ocean. When the motorboat travels so fast, it leaves a wake in the ocean, and that is what we call in fragrance a sillage. That when you leave a room, the fragrance still stays in the room, and so that's called sillage. So there are so many different aspects of perfumery, and I love to talk about it. So we talked originally about the fragrance being started in ancient Egypt through sacred rituals. For those who weren't with me in the beginning, that's how fragrance really started in ancient Egyptian, with the rituals of religious ceremonies being offered to the gods. And the word perfume comes from Latin perfumum, which means through smoke. And then we went into the Middle Ages. We talked about how galbanum, an ingredient, was used in these thuribles to invite sinners to come back to repent. As the aroma wafted through the thuribles that were swung backwards and forwards, it was a sign for sinners to come back to the church to repent. And then we went to France in the 17th, 18th century, and how France became the perfume capital of the world because of the amazing natural light that invited artists to come and paint in Grasse and in Honfleur. The Impressionists painted till late at night because the light was so beautiful. And it also fostered cattle to come and roam the beautiful fields, and the light and the beautiful sunshine also encouraged natural ingredients to grow, the jasmine and the rose and lilies, and so many different techniques were developed because of natural elements and through nature. And this is why fragrance is so exciting, and I have spent almost my entire career in fragrance. For those who didn't hear from me originally, I'm originally from South Africa. I've been in America for many, many years. I've had an amazing career in theater and in fragrance. And now I wrote my book called The Power of Perfume. And I have so many different stories in here about fragrance. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about is fragrance concentration. How is fragrance made, and why is it so important? So, in art we have the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. In literature, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. In music, there's the overture, the main theme, and the finale. So in perfumery, there's also a construction that perfumers have used for literally centuries, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we call them, that formula or that construction is known as top notes, middle notes, and base notes. So in my book, I don't know if you can see this, the sun is shining. You see the top note, the middle note, and the base note in this pyramid. So the pyramid was always used as an example of how fragrances are constructed. So the top of the pyramid is usually the lightest, and it doesn't last that long. It's the lightest part of the fragrance. It's usually those bright, effervescent notes, the lovely citrus notes and green notes, and very robust, that it sort of attracts you, brings you in. You spray it and it comes to you, and you just want to just take it and own it and just wear it. And those are the top notes that really, literally bring people to the fragrance. And then after about 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes less, it moves into the middle of the fragrance, the middle notes, or what we call the heart of the fragrance. I should have better drawings, but we have the top notes and the middle notes, and that's called the heart of the fragrance. And usually that's the area of perfumery that you remember the most. When you think about a perfume, what comes to your mind is probably the middle notes, the heart of the fragrance, and that lasts for about 3 hours on the skin. And those are the beautiful florals, gorgeous floral notes, and some spicy notes, just smooth, sensual notes that remind you of what the fragrance smells like. And then after, again, a few hours, the there are certain fixatives, which we call the base notes, which are the deeper, darker, heavier notes. Those are usually the woodsy notes from sandalwood, cedarwood, birchwood, some of the musks, and some of the amber notes. And they affix themselves to the heart notes. So they're called fixatives, and they usually last a lot longer. And that's why the base notes are at the base of this pyramid or the triangle. Next time I'll have proper visuals. And they last a lot longer. So that is the construction of perfumery: top notes, middle notes, base notes. So one of the things that's happening right now is more of a linear kind of construction, where the fragrance almost stays the same from beginning to middle and end. And you can see the difference. So here is the linear. You can see it's sort of middle, top, middle, and base, but it stays the same from beginning to middle to end. And that is a trend that is happening now in perfumery that makes the fragrance almost have the same theme from beginning to middle and end, as opposed to the triangle or the pyramid where the fragrance is very different. How many of you have ever experienced a fragrance that you love the beginning or the top notes, and maybe you don't love the way it goes into the middle notes and the base notes? Or you don't like the top notes, but you love the heart of the fragrance and you love the base notes. Does anybody have had any experience like that? I'd love to hear from you. Let's see if I can see these your questions or your comments. So, come on, everybody. I'd love to hear from you. Am I a citizen now? Yes, I am a citizen. Hello, Hydro Mike. I'm definitely a citizen. Have been a citizen for a long time. Let's see. What is my signature scent? You'd love to know. That was from somebody called Paris. My signature scent is really all the fragrances that I wear, that I create myself. I really love a beautiful, robust, sensual floral with some woodsy notes. I love a gardenia. I love rose. And I do love a woodsy base. So let's see, that's my signature scent.
Sue, can I ask a question on behalf of almost everyone?
Please.
I have to say that I test a lot of fragrances. And now I am in the middle of a project where I definitely have not liked the initial part of
Right.
the first dip.
Yeah.
And when I let it sit for an hour or two,
Yeah.
I'm telling my perfumer, I don't like how it started off, but I
Right.
love how it ended.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So that is what happens. You see, perfumers have this technique of constructing fragrances, top, middle, and base. And I'm just trying to get out of the sun here. So that, there we go. Oops, I made it worse. Okay. So Rafi, that's one of the issues, that, they start with a top note of light, bright, citrusy notes, or very light fragrances, ozonic and so on. But, you probably like the middle notes better. So that's why I believe that the linear type of fragrance is I prefer it. I like to smell a fragrance and keep it going sort of throughout the life of the fragrance. I don't like it when it changes so radically. And obviously, you probably feel that way too. And
I would like you to explain. I think majority, including myself, are very aware of what the pyramid's setup looks like. Top note, middle note, base note, because the entire world talks about that.
Right.
I don't believe the entire world talks about the linear.
Can
you get into that a little more?
So, yes, and I would love to, and thank you for the question. So, when I left Tiffany to have my daughter, I started my own company, and I had learned so much about fragrance by then. And by the way, I just want you to know, I am not a perfumer per se. I have never studied organic chemistry. Everything that I've learned basically on the job, through my research, through reading, through traveling, through meeting with perfumers, through going to different perfume museums. So everything that I've learned has really been organic. And one of the things that I feel is that there's too much technique and not enough heart. And when there's nothing better than when you wear a fragrance and somebody says, "Oh, you smell amazing. What are you wearing?" You feel fantastic. You feel confident and positive and fabulous and sexy, and it's the best compliment you could get. And that usually comes from when somebody can smell the fragrance on you, and that it really reflects your individuality and your personality. And when a fragrance does that, what are they smelling? They're smelling the heart of the fragrance. And don't you want that to be the same throughout? See, I do. I don't want a fragrance to sort of dry down and dissipate and not have the same kind of aroma. So I think, Rafi, that one of the things that you can say to your perfumer, and everybody here should start thinking about, how fragrances can be linear. You can have very complex ingredients. You can have beautiful citrus notes and beautiful floral notes and very heavy, deep, dark ouds and woodsy and musky notes. But there should be a linear theme throughout that stays. And that's how I like my fragrances. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but because I think we have become so accustomed to the way things smell first, and then how they throw, what the cold throw is,
Right.
what the warm throw is. Maybe you want to get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
What is the meaning of a cold throw and a warm throw? But I will say that although I never focused about being linear in my fragrances, I always wanted to have consistency
Right.
across the life of the fragrance, which you're saying I'm saying the same thing.
Right.
But I just didn't realize there was another way of looking at it, which is being linear, which is what I'm saying to my perfumer. I don't like the way it opens. I like the way it ends.
Exactly.
Make it so that it stays the way it ends from the beginning.
And that's going to be a challenge for them. You know why? Because of their training. Because perfumers have been trained, throughout their training about, how notes start and the notes start, develop, and end. And a lot of perfumers can't even think in a linear way. They only stick to the way they've always done it. So it's a challenge, and I always like to give a challenge to a perfumer, because for the very reason you're saying, you don't like the top, but you love the way it sort of diffuses and ends, and that for me is the mark of something that you love. So if that's what you like, then I think you should really definitely try and do that. Talk to your perfumer about that. But it's a challenge because this light is killing me. Perfumers have been trained in a certain way. It's almost like a classical pianist. Classical pianists, know exactly what the arpeggios are, what the octaves are. They know what to do. And it would be very hard for a classical pianist to suddenly play jazz, or for a jazz pianist to play classical. But there are some people that know how to, navigate both, and those are true artists as far as I'm concerned. That you can really take one aspect and sort of make it special and try something different. I think it's experimentation. I think that's a good thing to do in fragrance and perfumery. Don't do the same thing that everyone's done for years and years and years. Do something different. And by the way, that's something that I feel is an issue and is a challenge, because when there's a trend, then suddenly everybody gets on the same trend. So right now the trend is oud, O-U-D, which is this beautiful sandalwood note. But actually, how many of you know that oud actually comes from the agar tree? Agar. So when I was in Morocco and we went on a bus ride, I saw in the trees on the mountains all these goats, and they were up in the mountains. And I said to the bus driver and the tour guide, what are the goats doing up in the mountains, on the high mountains? They were actually searching for the agar berry. They were in agar trees. And the agar berry is what the goats seek, because in the agar berry is a little black kind of, it almost looks like a little dried out prune. And in the agar berry is the kernel, which is where the agar oud comes from. And that's where the oud comes from, that little kernel. And it's very, very expensive, and it's very, very beautiful. And that's what the goats clamber up the tree for. And when I was in Morocco, I got some of those kernels and I brought them back. I smuggled them in. But it's so interesting how these ingredients come from nature. And not only do we use them for perfumery, but even the animals love that odor and the aroma and the smell. Did you know that, Rafi, about the agar berry and the agar tree?
I will tell you my version that I know.
Okay.
I for many years, if I was to answer that question without having heard you, my response is that it is the agar wood that I'm aware of. It is also a what's the right word? It's a fungus that grows in the bark of the wood.
Yes.
And that fungus, depending on the type of the fungus, is what creates that smell. So in many parts of the world, they actually inject agar wood with fungus and particular types of funguses, which then makes it smell a certain genre. That's what I know. The kernel, I did not know. Can you tell me a little more about the kernel?
I wish I might even have it here. I could show you, but I'll show you next time. I'll put all my ingredients on a little tray and I'll show them to you next time. How's that? Would that be fun?
Yes, of course. I mean, but for that would be great for next time.
Yeah.
But I think going back so that everyone knows why, first of all, oud is so expensive. I think
it is.
I think you want to explain that to them. You're the expert in this, not me.
So oud is expensive because first of all, the agar berry is what attracts the aroma. It's from the fungus that goes into the tree, but the agar berry, the kernel, is what gives it its flavor and its taste, and it's very, very expensive because first of all, it's in such a remote part. You have to source it, which means people have to go up and get it, and that's expensive. And then you have to separate the berry from the outer berry from the inner kernel, and then you have to take the kernel and you have to extract it and you have to compress it, and that's another technique of extraction where they would extract some of the ingredients to yield the actual oil. So it's a very, very expensive undertaking, and that is particularly grown in the Morocco and the Middle East. So that is the reason oud is so prevalent in the Middle East. It doesn't grow mostly anywhere else, but when you go to Egypt or Morocco, that is the smell that you smell all the time, everywhere. It's very pungent, it's very heavy, it can be very beautiful depending on where you go, but that is definitely the fragrance du jour in the Middle East. That would not.
Let me add something.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I add something?
Sure.
From my know-how, a top-tier quality oud oil if I'm not mistaken, per kilo or per pound, I'm not sure, per kilo, could range anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000.
Exactly. Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you another one. So we'll finish with the oud, but I'm going to tell you another story about ambergris or ambergris, which is also used in the base of a fragrance as base notes. So ambergris, it's actually pronounced in English ambergris, but in French ambergris, you don't pronounce the S. It is actually an amazing ingredient from nature, from the sperm whale. So when the sperm whale, that's the male whale, when the sperm whale is swimming in the ocean and imbibes or swallows cuttlefish, the bones from the cuttlefish irritate his stomach lining. And what does he do? He wants to get rid of it. So he regurgitates it. It comes out that way. Some people think it comes out the other way, but it regurgitates. And a sweet, sticky substance washes up on the shore. And so how do people find ambergris? Well, people have to walk on the beach, literally, and they found this mound of ambergris. And again, through the technique of extraction, they would extract this mound of ambergris and to yield the magnificent smelling oil, essential oil. Now, you would think that, to be very coarse, that whale vomit doesn't smell so good. But it is an amazing ingredient, and talk about expense. You can imagine how much this ambergris, this mass of ambergris has to wash up on the shore. And why is it expensive? Because it's not produced in vast quantities. I mean, it's very rare when the ambergris washes up on the shore. It's not as though millions of pounds are washed up. It's maybe a pound, maybe a kilo, maybe 2 kilos. And so millions and millions of kilos have to be washed up on the shore in order to yield this ambergris. And again, through extraction, they extract the ambergris and they yield the oil. And it's called liquid gold. In perfumery, ambergris is really called liquid gold because it is so expensive. And the ambergris price on the market, if you can get the real ambergris, is about $40 to $50 to $60 to maybe even $100,000-$200,000 a pound. And in fact, if you Google ambergris, as I did a few weeks ago or months ago, a group of Chinese fishermen found this ambergris on the Chinese shore, and they were able to sell it for over $1 million because it was just so rare to find so much of it. So when I was in Morocco, they take like little wax cubes and they inject it and infuse it with ambergris oil. And so I took some of those. I got some of those, and I really, I got the agar wood, I got the incense, I got the incense rocks, I got the ambergris little scented wax cubes, and also musk. So now I'll tell you about musk, seeing we're talking about very rare ingredients and ingredients that are mostly used in the base notes. So again, perfumers have always been looking for interesting ingredients. They search the oceans, the cities, the forests. They go wherever they can find ingredients. And this is where perfumery really started out with nature. Today...
So I don't mean to interrupt you.
It's okay.
May I, 1 second? You said something important back to ambergris.
Yeah.
There aren't that many whales around anymore.
Right.
So where do they get ambergris now? And this is, I'm being cute because I know the answer, obviously. So the question is, where do they get ambergris now?
Well, they don't get real ambergris anymore because it's too rare and they don't harvest it the way they used to. So now it's all made synthetically or through molecules, which are trying to basically recreate the aroma of ambergris. The way most fragrances today are mostly chemicals, are mostly molecules. Unless you're harvesting, unless you're really farming sperm whales, ambergris is almost real ambergris is almost a thing of the past. Don't you think?
We're going to go down a rabbit hole right now, because then the next question is, you're saying something is a chemical or molecule. I think the word chemical might have a bad connotation, so I'm going to kind of lead you down a path and saying, Do you want to even discuss synthetic compared to essential oils? But I'll leave that to you when you want to do that. I don't want to guide the conversation.
That's
because
all right.
I'm, if it was me listening, I would be like, wait a second, now you're talking about chemicals. So is that a good thing or is that a bad thing that they're duplicating ambergris with molecules? I don't know.
Well, well, every fragrance today is made synthetically. So synthetics is another way of saying it's made in the lab. It's made through either headspace technology. So let me give you an example. What is I don't know if most of you know what headspace technology. It's when you're trying to capture an essence or an aroma that is around, but it doesn't really exist, or it exists in nature and you have to try and duplicate it. And what they do is basically they take these contraptions and through gas chronometers and different, I don't really know the technique of the word of it, but they take a bubble and through chemistry, they will try and capture the essence. Imagine a bush of roses, and they'll take almost like a bubble of glass bubble, and they will try and capture that essence through various technologies. It's called headspace technology. And when they take the bubble away, they're able to analyze what is in there. And then through chemistry, through molecules, they are able to almost duplicate the fragrance synthetically, which means it's made not by nature, it's made by man. And so that, and the jury is out. Are synthetics better? Are natural ingredients better? Everybody wants natural, but sometimes natural doesn't last. Milk ferments, whereas maybe some other aromas or other ingredients don't. But everybody wants purity, everybody wants nature, everybody wants natural. But again, sometimes synthetic fragrances, synthetic oils can be a lot more expensive because it takes a lot to create it synthetically. So, there's always going to be a discussion, which is better, natural or synthetics? And I talk about molecules and chemistry because it is chemistry. Chemistry really is what makes synthetics. So,
well, let me pause for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
Let me pause for a second. I want to say this out loud so everyone hears it. Most people think essential oils is the right answer. Do we agree on that? This is what they think.
That's
this
what
is the
they
general
think.
consensus.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, that's what they think. But I also know that essential oils are high irritants
Yes.
after a certain dosage. Do we agree on that as a fact?
Yes.
Okay. Do we also agree that to create a fragrance that's synthetic, sometimes it has two problems? One, it's much more expensive than the essential oil. Two, you actually can make it hypoallergenic where it's not so sensitive to your skin. Do you agree on that?
Yes, I do, because I've heard that and I've read that and I know that.
Okay. And I wanted people to hear that because it's very important for them to hear it from an expert, not me, because I have a brand. You are an expert. You have never experienced, and I want to announce this to everyone. Sue has not one of my candles, correct, Sue?
Yes, and he's keeping them away from me. I want them. I want all of them. I want to try them, but I haven't. It's true. I have not tried them.
Until Sue is finished with this endeavor, I don't want her to try any of my fragrances because this is not a sales pitch. This is strictly education. So we can touch on any subject without, being transparent. So if she says something that is real and that is contrary to what I do, I want you guys to know that this is how I show that, hey, you know what? I'm not afraid to talk about facts, really. And it comes from an expert. So that's why I did it this way. So I did not want you to have any of my candles.
No, I know that. And I think it's great because it's authentic. If I had your candles, I'm sure I would love some of them or all of them or most of them. And I'd probably say, oh, you've got to try the rose or you've got to try this from Rafi's candles. But because I am very authentic and I really think it's important to tell the truth. And if I like something, I'm going to say it. If I don't like something, I'm going to say it. But this is really all about... sorry to plug my book, but it's called The Power of Perfume. This is about perfumery. This is really about what drives me every single day. I am fascinated by it. I love it. I read about it. I come up with different fragrances, and I was so lucky to be introduced to Rafi, who has asked me to come on board and do these educational series. So I hope you're enjoying this, everybody. And
can we give credit to Judy, your friend who introduced?
I want to do that. And so, exactly. So, years ago, I met Judy Goss, who was a friend who was doing a lot of women's groups and leadership programs. And I knew her, I met her. I actually had done a fragrance experience with her, and she came to my boutique many years ago. And Judy contacted me about 10 days ago and said, Sue, this company, Rafi, is looking for a perfumer and wants to do educational seminars. And she said, I think you'd be great. And so she introduced me to Rafi. So I had never heard of him. I'd never heard of his candles. I had heard of Thompson Ferrier, but I really didn't know what it was. And we talked and we spoke on phone, and then we did a Zoom, and then I got the job. And I actually wrote to Judy and I said, thank you so much. And I actually asked for her address and I sent her a bouquet of flowers to thank her. So I just wanted to say that I'm so excited to be here because I'm talking about things that I love. Now, I might not know everything about fragrance. I've been in it for a long time, but there are some things that I'm sure I don't know, and I'm sure Rafi knows more, and some things that Rafi might not know, but I know. But to have the discussion and to be here and to be able to talk about it and to be able to express what I feel about my passion is important to me. And I hope I'm giving everybody good value and good education, because that's what this is about. And, I want to talk about ingredients. I want to talk about the top notes, the middle notes, the base notes. I want to talk about why perfume has stayed throughout the years, and what the different trends are, and what the fragrance through the decades, why certain fragrances were popular in the 1920s, and why certain fragrances are still popular 100 years later, a la Chanel No. 5, although it's changed so much, and I'll tell you the story about that. And just, the whole idea of perfumery, where it's going and what it's been and what it's doing. So I hope you're all learning, and I hope you're enjoying it. And Rafi, I would love to hear from you what your thoughts are.
I have to give you a little compliment, because the way there's two things. First of all, I would love to hear the story about Chanel.
Okay.
So please, when I'm done, I would love to hear the story, because I'm a big fan of Chanel, all her struggles, all her, during World War II. I mean, the whole story of her near bankruptcy and everything that she did. But I do want to hear about the fragrance. But before that, you guys should know that in the world of accessible, when somebody has a lot of money, they have access to everything, right? So when you don't have enough money, you try one thing and you stick to it. But in the celebrity world, celebrities have a ton of money, a ton of access, a ton of gifting. Everything is available to a celebrity. And what I want to say is, celebrities go to Sue for fragrance creation. And for me, that's quite intriguing, because celebrities can go to anyone, but they go to somebody like Sue, who they feel that Sue can create uniqueness. In the world flooded with dupes
Yeah.
fragrances that are so like everything is the same.
Yeah.
To be able to create something new requires a massive amount of library. So it's the combination of her ability to deal with the celebrity, her credibility with them, and that's why we're here with her. So to say to you, Sue, going forward, I want to hear about Chanel now.
Okay.
I really do.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm going to tell you all about my celebrities, but let me tell you about Chanel number 5. So, yes, Gabrielle Coco Chanel was a designer, and she had a lot of backing, and I'm going to give you sort of the top note. I'm not going to give you all the basic history, but what I want to tell you is how did Chanel number 5 come to be? So she was quite successful doing her designing, and one day, I guess she thought, or somebody thought, that she should do a fragrance. So she went to a very famous perfumer of the day. His name was Ernest Beaux, Beaux. You don't pronounce the X in French. His name was Ernest Beaux. He was a wonderful perfumer. And she went to him and she said, Monsieur Beaux, I want to make a fragrance for the women I'm clothing. And she said that she told them what her direction was. Feminine, structured, luxury, timeless. And she, of course, she said it in her in her wonderful French accent. Monsieur Beaux, I want to make a fragrance for the women I'm dressing and clothing. I want something French and feminine and timeless and beautiful and blah, blah, blah. And he heard all that. Sorry, 1 second. So he went to his lab and he came back a few weeks later with about 10 different submissions. And he put them on the table and she started to evaluate them. And the story is that when she got to the 5th one, she stopped immediately and she said, "Oh la la, qu'est-ce que c'est? What is this?" It was the 5th one that she tried, and it was something very different from all the other submissions that were ahead of that. And they were either, very floral or very spicy, because in the 1910s and 1920s, everything was very spicy. And so this one had a certain element that she had never smelt before. And he said to her it was a combination of alcohol and dehydrogenated oil with the jasmine and the rose. And it was an amazing fragrance that uplifted, that diffused, had this feminine powdery aspect. And she loved it. And she said, this is the one I want. And she called it Chanel number 5. First of all, it was the 5th one that she had tried. Her birthday is in May the 5th. And so that was what she wanted. And when Ernest Beaux went back to the lab, he said to his assistant, "Jacques, what did you do? You made too much aldehydic in the formula. It's a terrible mistake." Guess what? The most powerful and most profitable mistake in perfume history. So Chanel number 5, if you wear it, if you try it today, mostly young people will hate it because it's very powdery. And in the 1910 and 1920s, that was the sort of direction that our mothers and our grandmothers wore, particularly face powder. So when our mothers or our grandmothers put face powder on, there was a certain rose note in the face powder. And so when they kissed their mother or the grandmother, they got this powdery note. And it certainly reminded them of the mother or grandmother. So now, fast forward 50, 60 years, Chanel number 5 is still popular, but it's got the Chanel name. If you smell it blind, you would probably hate it because it's very powdery and it has that kind of powdery old-fashioned note. And so we love Chanel number 5 because it is really a beautiful fragrance. But the trend has gone away from that flowery, powdery note. And so do we love Chanel number 5 because it's Chanel or because of the fragrance. So,
Can I answer that?
yes.
So it's a common knowledge that many blind tests have been made, and majority of women on a blind test do not like Chanel number
Right.
5 if they've never smelled it before. Correct?
Correct, because it reminds them of an old-fashioned lady. That's what they all say is old-fashioned, grandma type.
Right. And by the way, I'm going to plug the brand a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of these classical iris type top notes where it's powdery, and then if you kind of mix the iris, which is a powdery, with, let's say, a rose, or you mix it with a leather, or you mix it with something else, these classical
Notes.
new what do you call it, references.
Yeah.
If for me, for my brand, which is a brand that's for, number one, we're not inexpensive. We're $185
Yeah.
a candle, starting there, and those references are meaningful to us,
Right.
because they make them inherently sophisticated, because we grew up with kissing our grandmothers,
Right.
who had the rose powder, or it's so
It's classic, it's classic, it's feminine, it's what women smelled like in those days. And that's the reference. But today, if you give a young person or millennial a powdery rose fragrance, the first thing they'll say is grandma, which is maybe grandmas are fabulous and my grandmas were great, but the nuance of that kind of fragrance is not popular with young people today, which is a shame, because I'm with you. I like those sort of classic fragrances.
I happen, now this is not about me, this is you, but I happen to love Dior Homme, particularly the Intense, Dior Homme Intense, which is an iris with a little bit of leather, it's got vanilla and so forth. Such a classical fragrance. And you put it on a guy, all of a sudden you smell like not $1 million, but you smell,
Sophisticated.
how do you say this, of money. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, Rafi, I really agree with you. And I think Tina said they're not educated. Tina, I agree with you. And somebody said, I love the Dior Private Sense. That's part of why I love doing what I'm doing, because when I meet with people and I do corporate events and team building events and I talk to people about fragrance, I want them to know the whole sort of bandwidth of fragrance, not just what's popular today. Everywhere you go today, it's oud, 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 oud. Or it's something very light and citrusy, or something very creative enters, because that's what it is. But, think about those old, amazing fragrances that you just can't get today. There is a lack of education, sadly. And I'm so happy that we're doing this, because if I can help and bring some awareness and education to people with you also, Rafi, I think, we're doing a huge service to everybody. It's opening their horizons. It's opening their vistas to know that, fragrance is not just a single note. It's not just oud. It's a beautiful array of beautiful hundreds of different ingredients. So is there anything else you want to say about that? Because I want to tell another story.
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I definitely do. This is what I've been talking about for the past year with my audience, that the United States has become a big mediocre, a very mediocre palate. And the palate of my customer has become more and more sophisticated because of what we're doing, because of me going on and explaining these things, because you are here, because I say this, it's very hard, by the way, once you fly private to then fly commercial. It's very hard. But unless you taste it, unless you experience something, it's sad, but middle America doesn't know. And it's okay that the rest of the world is going to follow like sheep. I refuse to do that. I don't follow trends. I don't want to follow trends. What I do want is my customer base to have a better understanding of fragrance, how it's made, why it is, what does it mean to have, what is ambergris, like you're explaining. And the reason is why. Once you experience something like clothes, beautiful fabrics, it's very hard for you to go to Walmart and buy a synthetic, cheaply sewn, cheaply made, full of full of synthetics. Not necessarily synthetics. It's just not well made.
But also, I'm going to interrupt 1 second. The difference between a beautiful silk and a rayon is the difference between breathing and suffocating, because rayon doesn't breathe. So you might have a beautiful outfit, which is rayon or nylon, but it doesn't breathe. So what happens? You start to perspire and it starts to really turn on you. Whereas natural fabrics will breathe and you won't have that issue. And the same is true for fragrance. You're right. It's unfortunately, America has become a palette of mediocrity and Me Too's. Everybody wants to smell like everybody else. And
so I want to touch on another subject, and I don't know when you want me to touch on this, but what I want to talk about is when somebody like me, a brand, goes to a perfumer, I have noticed most brand owners do not know how to communicate with perfumers.
Right.
They don't know how to guide a perfumer. They don't know what to say to a perfumer. So what ends up happening is they say to the perfumer, make me something that's going to sell.
Right.
What does a perfumer do? You see?
The same old thing. Another oud or another Creed Aventus. They're around for... That's the problem. There's
Yes.
no language. There's no vocabulary. That's the problem.
So now, our what is oud? Somebody's asking. We'll get to that in a second. But so now what do I do? Before I go to a perfumer, I spend an enormous amount of time writing a brief.
Mm-hmm. So
now
we can explain what that is.
You go ahead. You explain what that is.
Well, finish your story and then I'll explain it.
Okay. So now perfumers come, when I'm going to work with perfumers, now they want to work with me because I know how to guide them, and it becomes a challenge for them to actually create the fantasy that I'm putting from words into a fragrance. Because I go out of my way to say, I want 30% of the fragrance to do this, 20% to do that, 5% to do that, 17% to do that, and so forth. And then I write a romantic story about what the emotions is about it, and then I tell them what the delivery is.
Right.
So I spend months writing this so that they can then create something. Now, tell them what a brief is.
So I totally get, Rafi, I'm so happy we're on the same page. So what is a brief? A brief is a document that is a guide for perfumers to tell them what's in your head, because they don't know what's in your head. So you have to explain it. You have to write it. You have to really be very accurate. If you're looking for a certain color, you have to know what that color is, and you have to explain it to an artist so the artist can paint that or get that color. The same is true for a brief in perfumery. So the idea is to describe what you want, give it the language that they will understand, tell a story about what the fragrance should be about, and what it should be to the ultimate end user, how they should feel. Those are sort of the romantic aspects of a brief. And it can be as short or as long as you want it to be, but it has to tell a story. It has to get into that perfumer's head so that he or she knows how to deliver it and make it so that it matches the story that you want to tell. It also has to have some actual elements. I mean, what kind of pricing is it? Is it going to be a $5 candle, or is it going to be a $500 candle? That will determine what ingredients they use, whether they use a real Bulgarian rose oil, which could be $5,000 a pound, or could it be a lookalike rose, like a geranium, which could be $10 a pound? So in a brief, you have to also tell them what is the retail price, who's the end user. So without, as well as having a story and as well as giving the romance and the language and turning that perfume into something so that he or she is so excited about, it also has to have some actual, financial aspects to it.
So to give an idea about this brief, Sue, would you mind if I kind of go over one brief I've done for one fragrance?
Yes.
It's going to be interesting.
And then I will give you a brief that I'm doing. I would love that. Go ahead.
Okay, so my briefs have 4 parts to them. One is called expectation, one is fragrance direction, one is called fragrance composition, and one is called the story. So for example, this particular one that I'm doing, it's the expectation is dark, authoritative, resinous, evening. So those are the words that I use. Then I go into fragrance direction, deep, wood, and resin. And then I go into the composition. I say smoked cedar, 30%. It's the backbone, it's dry, it's dark, and structural. Then I say leather accord, 25%, gives it authority and tailored depth. And then I say amber resin, 18%, which is warm and slow diffusion. I say incense, it could be frankincense, it could be oblivion, it's 12%, but it gives it that spiritual smoky lift. Then I say tobacco lift, which is 10%, and it adds richness and gravity. And then black pepper, spicy accent, sharpness, and composition. And the last thing I do is I tell a story.
Sorry.
Wait a second. Oh, you're there?
Yeah.
Oh. And so I write this for my perfumer to be able to create something. So I'm not going to read all of it, but there you go. This is how I create those fragrances. This is what I do.
So, Rafi, I have a question, because you're giving the perfumer a recipe. When you're saying, 10% or 30%, and you're giving them the direction. Let me ask you a question. When they finally do it, does it match your expectation or not?
So this follows a conversation. Okay?
Yeah.
It follows a conversation, meaning we take this and then we verbally talk. When we verbally talk, it becomes more of an emotion on the fragrance side, and they take this as a pure guide. Mm-hmm. This is not cast in stone, because when you're going to do a fragrance, you're doing 4 or 5 candles, you have to write all this. So right. The answer is yes and no.
Which is interesting, because a lot of perfumers want the license and the creativity to, let's talk about the story now, not so much the recipe, but when they hear the story or they read the story, they want to really indulge in and use their creativity to come up with the story that hopefully will meet your expectations.
But wait, I'm sorry. Yeah. But we also provide them with an image of the product.
Yeah.
So we also provide them with an image of a product. So the product, the fragrance, the romance story, and the recipe, I give it all to them, and I say, do what you think is right. And that's how I handle it. Right. Not everyone does it this way. There's no right or wrong answer, but this is how I do it.
Right. And out of all the candles you've done and all the submissions you've done and the briefs you've written, what is the sort of positive, what is the percentage of confidence and positivity that you've experienced with them?
It's a realization that I might be wrong in my direction sometimes.
Well, it's interesting, because I think it's great that you give them the recipe and you give them the direction, because in all my time developing fragrances for Chanel, for Tiffany, for Burberry, for Trish McEvoy, for Avon, for Lancaster. I have never given them that specificity of 30% of this or 20% of that, because I want my creativity to reflect the brand image. So you see, you are creating the fragrances for your candles because you're the brand. So it can be anything that you want, and anything that you want is yours. When I was creating fragrances for those companies, particularly Tiffany and Burberry and Trish McEvoy and Avon, I could not use my own point of view. I couldn't come up and say, this is what I want, it's going to reflect Sue Phillips. No. I had to put my sort of my points of view aside and think, what is the right aspect for the brand? And the brand had to have the brand had to be the leading way. In other words, I had to create a fragrance that reflected the brand image, not Sue Phillips's image. And sometimes,
well, you're saying the same thing I'm saying, and here's why. What you're saying is you wrote a brief on behalf of the brand,
yes,
and you then created that fragrance based on the brand identity.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
That's okay, which is what I'm doing. I'm the brand, and therefore this is what I do.
Right.
And you did exactly the same thing on behalf of the brand.
Right. And what somebody just said, in the end, fragrance is not just composition, it's identity, memory, and experience all captured in a single moment. Absolutely. If we can do that in a brief and telling a story, and we can ultimately see how it manifests in a product, in a candle, in a perfume, that is magic. That's absolute magic.
So you said you went to Morocco quite a bit.
Yes.
And so did I. And you know what? I think I'm going to leave that conversation for another day because I think next time we'll talk about how these stories become part of the fragrance itself. So if you look at, and you don't have any of my candles, so if you look at my white collection, in the back there's a story of how the brief actually. So I print the brief on the candle now.
That's
on the
wonderful.
box.
That's great. That's wonderful.
So anyway, let's.
So go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. This is your
Okay,
day.
so I want to talk about another ingredient, which is so wonderful that not a lot of people know about it. And it was a very important ingredient direction in the late 1800s, 1900s, in 1910, 1920. It's a fragrance family called Chypre. How many people know about Chypre? And I'll spell it Chypre. So Chypre was and is a beautiful ingredient that has the name actually comes from Cyprus, and it's an earthy, mossy, green, deep dark green kind of a color and a fragrance. And in 1920, Francois Coty came up with a fragrance called Chypre. And it is very deep, it's robust, it's got an earthy, mossy kind of fragrance to it. It's rich and it is quite heavy. And so I had to go to Cyprus because I wanted to try it. And Cyprus is now so built up that they now sell little bottles of Chypre. But in the early days, there were so many beautiful Chypre plants that you could smell it in the air. And Francois Coty, actually created his fragrance called Chypre. And that was a trend that was very popular in 1910, 1920, and so on. And then, of course, other fragrances came about, florals and woodsy and so on. But Rafi, do you have a favorite chypre fragrance or not?
I don't.
So
I can't say I do.
have you smelled chypre?
Yes.
Do you like it?
Um,
No, you don't.
I don't have an answer.
You hesitated, so that means you don't like it.
It's not that. It's just, some things I feel that I grab. It's like everyone else on the planet. You gravitate
Right.
towards
What you
certain
like.
fragrances,
Yeah.
and you don't. So we as humans, I believe, have predisposition for key notes.
Yes.
But I think, which is a subject for another day,
Yeah.
which is why I am always hesitant to say to someone, it's got vanilla. Because if you don't like vanilla,
Exactly.
and vanilla is in the composition, and you happen to love the composition,
Right.
then what happened to you not liking the vanilla? So it's not, it's just one ingredient of 60 different fragrances when you make a bouquet.
Right.
So,
Well,
and then, it's, go ahead.
no, you're 100% right. Fragrance is all about memory and emotion. And if you, no, I don't want to ignore comments. I think some of these comments are wonderful. I just want to say something. Stanley David says, Pink Roses and Sassafras has a great scent. I don't know what that is. Chance by Chanel by Tina. But this was a great question. Do you believe fragrance is more personal or more universal in how it's perceived? That's a very good question. I think fragrance right now is more personal because the trend right now is about customization. It's really about reflecting one's own individuality and one's own personality. And I go back to saying that if you get a compliment about a fragrance you're wearing, it's magical. It makes you feel confident. It makes you feel happy. It makes you feel positive. It makes you feel sexy and sensual. And I think the trend right now is really all about bespoke or customization. And the next time I will tell you about fragrance through the decades. I do a whole PowerPoint presentation. I just did one yesterday for a college that I'm speaking at about fragrance through the decades and why certain fragrances were popular at that particular time. And it's really interesting because there are certain decades or times in your life that you will smell a fragrance that'll take you right back to a certain time in your life or a certain memory or with somebody. And fragrance is all about memory and emotion. It's because our sense of smell, our olfactory sense, goes directly to the limbic system, to the brain, and that triggers memory and emotion. It also triggers taste. Our olfactory sense is also very important for taste. So that is why our sense of smell, I believe, and studies have shown that our sense of smell is our most powerful sense. Our sight is our strongest, but the most powerful is our sense of smell. And this really became known very importantly during the pandemic when so many people lost their sense of smell. They became anosmic. So anosmia, which means you have no sense of smell, you cannot smell at all, has always been around. I spoke and met with Dr. Robert Henkin, who is the head of the Taste and Smell Clinic in Washington, D.C. And I met with him about 10 years ago, way before the pandemic. And he had said to me, Sue, millions of people lost their sense of smell. But guess what? It wasn't a thing. Suddenly the pandemic came and millions of people literally lost their sense of smell and were very devastated by it. They couldn't smell, they couldn't taste, they didn't want to go out, they didn't want to socialize. I was in a meeting yesterday where somebody said that they knew people who'd lost their sense of smell and they were so miserable that they actually committed suicide. Now that's very, very, dire. But I have literally spoken to and helped hundreds of people regain their sense of smell, and their stories are amazing. And that's going to be in my next book because I've actually met hundreds of people who lost their sense of smell and they were miserable. So I always say to people, Honor your sense of smell. It's a most beautiful gift that we have. It can help us be positive. You can smell the most beautiful aromas in the world and some not so wonderful, but it can also help you distinguish problems. If there's smoke, if there's fire, if there's danger, if there's something putrid, if there's something rotten in the fridge that you don't know about, or in the supermarket. So it's really a very important sense. It's our most powerful sense. And we're talking about perfumery, which is the positive aspect of fragrance, which is, beautiful, and we all want to smell good. But understanding how important our sense of smell is really critical. And it's something that, I talk about all the time. So,
Sue,
yes,
I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you for letting us know that. And I'm going to add one more thing to that. Just remember, if you can't smell anything, you can't tell if something is rotten. You can't tell if you have a fire in, God forbid, anywhere. Right. You can't tell. There's your sense of smell. You rely on so right. much for it to be an alarm clock to you, or in some way, just to know, to turn on your even taste buds too.
Right.
When you're so. But I am curious about this, which I don't have the answer to this just yet. When people say something is musky,
yes,
body odor, dirt, wet forest floor, decomposition of leaves. There's this earthiness, that nuttiness. Why is that when you describe it this way, when you say dirt, earth, musk, it's, deer urine, sometimes cow dung. There is always this, it sounds like it's terrible, yet it's always part of fragrances.
Well, let me tell you about musk. So you mentioned musk. So you know where musk comes from? So musk comes from the deer or the civet cat. Now, again, perfumers have been looking for interesting ingredients for centuries. As I said, they travel the oceans, the forests, the cities, always looking for interesting ingredients. So the story is that, and this is a sort of top-note story, the deer and the civet cat and the beaver, particularly when they get a little aroused, when they get sexy, they excrete a certain, they have certain excretions. And these excretions can be very sensual and sexy. Now, how and why those perfumers found them, we're not going to go there. But, but it is used as a fixative. Earthy, musky, fungal, fecal kind of ingredients give a fragrance body. It gives a fragrance depth, and it gives a fragrance a kind of a sensuality that some people might like and some people might not. It's not all about roses and lilies and citrus. Sometimes we use some of these deep, dark sense ingredients to give body to a fragrance. And not all fragrances, as I said, are going to be sweet and lovely and innocent. They're going to be quite, dirty, if in a way. And sometimes that makes people feel very sexy and very aroused. So that's what I would say, Rafi, that it's all about preference.
I'm listening carefully, and because when in my way of looking at the world when it comes to fragrance, we as a brand tend to lean more towards those musky, earthy notes as what I call the mattress, the base blanket, right? And then I always rely on building above it, meaning, if it's going to be black tea, white tea, lychee, rose, guava, whatever, ylang ylang, whatever the fragrances are, I just tend to like those musky, like, I was passing by what do you call it? It's called, when they do a reconstruction, called a knockdown. Some houses have septic systems, right?
Sure.
The leach field itself, they dug up the leach field. So I walked onto the leach field, and I grabbed that dirt that the poop goes into, right?
Yeah.
But once it's been percolated and filled, and then you take that dirt and you put it up to your nose, you realize, wow, this is like the base of some of the things we use.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
wild.
Exactly.
It's disgusting, but it's true.
Well,
So,
it's all preference. As I said, not everything can be sweet and lovely. I mean, perfumery is definitely an art and a science. And the science is knowing how to put all these things together. And the art is knowing what you want to create and what you want to put together. And the science is understanding different ingredients, different notes, and knowing how to formulate them. The art is knowing exactly what you want. If you're saying, gosh, some of the ground and the dirt and the fecal stuff smells quite sexy, and I want to put that as a base for my fragrance, that's the artistry in you. And then you build upon it. And that can be very sexy and very compelling. So it doesn't mean that it's wrong. I don't think anything is, we're not saying it's wrong. It's just a question of preference. And it's also a question of what social norms are gravitating towards. And I go back to sort of certain fragrance families and certain fragrances over the decades. Why some fragrances? Remember Giorgio Beverly Hills? It was this huge, big pineapple, floral, kind of a fruity note that was so big it really reflected the 80s, the big hairstyles, the big shoulder pads, the big fragrance that was actually banned in the restaurants in Beverly Hills because it was so overpowering. Now that
I remember that fragrance vividly.
Vividly. I mean, you see the yellow and white stripes and you know exactly what that fragrance is.
Yes.
And that fragrance today would be so out of place because right now everything is about either being very fresh and clean as Americans like, and this whole sort of, we've deodorized ourselves to such an extent that everything is fresh and clean, and then woodsy. So those are the sort of notes that are popular now. And if you came up with a Giorgio Beverly Hills now, it would be a disaster because people wouldn't like it at all. So I think it's about preference.
Yes. Now, you're touched on a subject that I took notes and I wanted you to. I've been waiting for the right moment.
Okay.
This seems to be the right moment.
Okay.
Can you talk to us about cultures?
Yes.
Asian, Indian, Pakistani, Middle Eastern, South African, North African, Alaskan. What does culture?
Yeah.
How does culture look at fragrance? And tell me about that, whatever you know.
So culture also refers to foods. So every culture has their preference for foods. Asians love very Asian food. South Americans love spicy food. Moroccans love the tagines, the very sensual, the lamb and the spices with lamb. The English had terrible food. For years they had terrible food, but their food is getting better now. And of course, South Africans love beef, and they like very strong beef. So when you consider food in culture, there are different preferences, which is also manifests in fragrance. And I think I said a couple of hours ago that different cultures like different fragrances. So I said that the Americans love fresh and clean. The Europeans love florals. The English love lavender. The South Americans love spicy. The Middle East love oud and incense. And the Japanese don't wear fragrance, but they love to give fragrance as a gift. Now, what's really interesting is that these cultural differences also work either negatively or positively with fragrance. So would a Chanel number 5 be apropos these days if you didn't know it was Chanel, if it was this powdery aldehydic fragrance? Most people wouldn't like it. I think the French would like it, and I think the English would like it. But Americans don't like that powdery note for some reason, because it reminds them, because fragrance is all about memory and emotion, it reminds them of something that they don't want to be. They don't want to be old like their grandparents or their grandmother. And so that becomes a negative. So fragrance, I believe that a beautiful rose is fabulous, and roses are coming back, but interesting rose, a rose with exotic and spicy notes, not just a floral fragrance, a rose with a bit of texture and dimension. So if you think about different cultures, we can't all be homogeneous. We can't all like the same color. We can't all like the same fragrance. We can't all like the same food. And that's what makes us different. That's what makes us, interesting. And that's what gives us depth and texture and cultural differences. So, I'll tell you a story. When I was a little girl growing up in South Africa, we always used to have, a soup to start with, or a first course and then a main course. And the fruit in South Africa is just amazing. It's beautifully, flavorful and interesting. Guava and grenadella. I don't know if you know what guavas are, or grenadella. Of course, lychees and mangoes. But there was a certain fruit called pawpaw, which is like a papaya. And it's spelled Pawpaw. And my mom, we would have it afterwards for dessert, and I couldn't bear it. It had a horrible smell. It had a smell of, I'll just say it, fecal smell. Because when it was growing in the plants, in the earth of South Africa, the earth was very rich and very sort of filled with nutrients and minerals. But the smell would go into the pawpaw. So this was beautiful fruit, the yellow flavor, the yellow color, and the little black seeds, just like papaya. And I couldn't bear it. And my father once said to my mother, "Darling, it's okay. She doesn't like it because she knows that it smells bad." And I remember that smell so vividly. So I could never eat pawpaw. When I came to America and I tried papaya, I said, "Oh my God, this is so different. This is so sweet. It's so lovely. It's so different from what I had grown up with." So, those are the things that you remember, and the cultural differences. Now, certain people in South Africa, loved that pawpaw because it reminded them of the earth and the South African very heavy, sort of dungy kind of fragrances. So it's really interesting.
Can I add something to this on this subject that you're talking right now?
Yes.
That I do. So I grow gardenias every summer.
Mm-hmm. I love gardenia.
So gardenia, by the way, you're saying you said the story in South Africa where the plant is absorbing the earth as it's maturing.
Right.
Gardenia has the same effect. When gardenia starts in the beginning of summer, it's very light, it's very floral, it's very sweet. But as gardenia matures, the plant itself, and the flower begins to extract the earth, the nuttiness, and the muskiness of the dirt.
Oh my God. What the fuck? Oh. I don't know what happened to my computer. It just died. I'm coming back on. Sorry, Rafi. I was listening. Hopefully it'll come back on. Anyway, I hope everybody can hear what you're saying. I don't know what happened to my computer. I can't hear him either. My computer just died. I don't know what happened, but I'm here with you guys. Can you hear me, everybody? Okay, so I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. Rafi just died on me, and my computer just died. But I'm so happy that we've done this tonight. For those who are new, I'm so happy that we did this, that I did this. My name is Sue Phillips. I have been in the fragrance world for a long, long time. I hope you've enjoyed this educational seminar, and would love to hear from you. I love the fact that you're writing, and thank you for saying you can hear me. I'm delighted about that. It's been so much fun. We're going to do another 5 weeks every Thursday night from 6 to 8. No, 6 to 8. And during the week, I'd love you to think about something. I'd love you to think about, what are my favorite notes, Mary? Well, thank you, Nicole. It's an honor seeing everybody. My favorite notes are really, I love a green fragrance, green leaves, green tea, green grass, mixed with a beautiful rose, an exotic rose with a gardenia, and then with heavier notes of wood and chypre. So if you go to my website, SuePhillips.com, you'll see some of the fragrances that I have created. Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate that. I would love you to see what kind of things we've created. So somebody asked, when creating a custom scent, what is the most important question you ask your client? I love that. I always ask them what kind of lifestyle they have, what they like, what colors they like, what music they like. And in fact, I give them a scent quiz. And if you want to know what that is, you can go to my website, SuePhillips.com, and take the scent quiz. And it'll be very interesting to see what comes up as your custom scent, whether it's fresh, floral, woodsy, or spicy. And Nicole, what was your scent? Your spicy. Okay. Does that fit with your personality, with your individuality? I hope so. So yes, I think we've heard that Rafi, I don't know what happened to this, and my computer died, but I'm happy we're still on. So I have so much to tell you. There's so many things that I can tell you about fragrance. And a lot of this is in my book, The Power of Perfume. So when I was a adjunct professor at LIM College and FIT, I had a whole curriculum, and it was a 14-week curriculum, and every week there was another subject, and it was just wonderful. The history of fragrance. We talked about the different categories, chypre and fougere, how to create a successful fragrance, the language of perfumery, That is one thing that Rafi talked about to his perfumers. I'm going to tell you about the language of perfumery, how to explain, how to describe fragrance. You know, so many people say, oh, it's nice, it's wonderful. We have to do better than that. We have to really, oh, my computer just came back on, yay. I don't know if you're on, Rafi. I don't know what happened, but so I would like us all, thank you, I love this necklace. I would like us all to think about 2 things this week. Think about what fragrance you love and how you would describe it. And also what I'd love you to think about is how to distinguish different notes. And I always say, go to the supermarket, pick up an orange, a clementine, a mandarin, and some of these citrus notes, and look at them, and then smell them blind. So when you look at everything, all the citrus notes, they all look the same. But when you identify them and you smell them blind, you can actually distinguish the difference. And that's a way of smelling, and smelling again, to really distinguish different notes. Because not all citrus is the same. Do you know what a bergamot is? So a bergamot looks like an orange. it smells like an orange, but you cannot eat it because it is so bitter. And it's used in Europe for perfumery and for teas, bergamot tea. And so think about how different ingredients smell, and you can really enjoy the aspect. Yes, training the memory is one of the things that helps, absolutely. When I help people regain their sense of smell after they'd had COVID, I took them on a scent healing journey, and I was able to, there you are, you're back, Rafi. You're back, Rafi.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, I can hear you. I don't know what happened, but everything
Your computer died, and we lost the connection.
Oh, is that what happened? Oh my goodness. Well, my computer came back on, but the people could hear me and we're still talking, so that's great. So I'm just telling everybody that I really want them this week to think about smelling different ingredients and learning how to distinguish different notes by going to the supermarket, looking at a lemon, a lime, an orange, a tangerine, a clementine, a mandarin, and trying to distinguish those notes by smelling blind, because when you smell blind, you can really train your nose. So that's sort of a way to really start enjoying and valuing your sense of smell and distinguishing different notes and different ingredients.
I am so glad you're giving them homework to do, by the way.
Yes.
Thank you.
And one other thing I said to them, they have to learn how to think about describing fragrance, because next week we're going to talk about the language of fragrance and the vocabulary. And it shouldn't nothing should always be, oh, it's fabulous, or it smells good. We have to do better than that, right?
Oh my God, you are so on my radar here. You're like on the same wavelength as me. You know, I cannot tell you how important that is when somebody says, I like it. I'm like, no. What do you like about it? What are you smelling? What are you feeling?
Right.
You know, go a little deeper, and they have a very tough time. So, as a project that we embarked on, which is this that we're doing,
yes.
Not only are we educating the audience, we're also helping them become better
evaluators in a way.
Evaluators,
judging, yes. Absolutely. You know, think about this, people. If you can do a little brief of your own, if you had a wonderful idea for a fragrance of what you wanted it to smell like and what it was, test yourself, write a brief. It could be a description of what you like, what you want it to smell like, what it means to you, what your expectations are. And it could be a paragraph, it could be a page, but test yourself and try and come up with something that's really motivating for you to do a wonderful paragraph or a page of what fragrance means to you and what a brief would be and how you would write it. Because I think that would be something really interesting. And I would love to see them. So send them in to me.
Where should they send it to you? You want to share an email?
Yeah, I would. Is it okay? Do you mind?
Absolutely not. I'm happy to. You want me to type it for you?
Okay, it's you can send it to info@suephillips.com, and you can just info and two L's. And what you can do is just in the subject, just say, you know, fragrance brief or my fragrance direction, because it would be really interesting. And what I would do is I would read the best ones that I get. How about that? It could be a little competition to see which ones go. But this is the way that I love to talk to my clients and my students when I was teaching. And I'm teaching now at Ollie Ringling College in Sarasota. I'm teaching for the next 4 weeks at Ollie, and I'm going to be here for the next 5 weeks every Thursday night at 6 o'clock Eastern. And we're going to do some fun things. Rafi, this has been so much fun talking to you and having us do this together. I'm so happy we're doing this together.
My pleasure, but let me just add one thing, please.
Yeah.
No one is allowed to use AI to create the brief.
Correct.
You're supposed to write it on your own.
Yes, thank you for saying that. It's true. Because, you know, if we use AI, our brains don't work. We need to really get the cobwebs out of our brains and start to write, to smell, to talk, to enjoy food, and to express ourselves authentically, not through AI. Right?
Sue, I want to say thank you to you.
Thank you.
For coming on here. I'm going to repeat what you just said, which is Sue will return next Thursday, the same hour for 2 hours at 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. She gave you guys homework, which is awesome. No AI, just whatever you have to do, you got to do it on your own. Sue, thank you for coming on here. We're going to see you next Thursday. Any last questions before we go?
Yes.
We'll take one more question, Sue.
Okay. All I believe in is, you know what? Smell with your brain. Really enjoy it and challenge yourself and think about colors and art and music and scents, and put all the senses together and think about what wonderful sensory world we live in. And our sense of smell is our most powerful. So just be aware of how important our sense of smell is, both good smells and bad smells.
All right, thank you so much. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Thank you so much, Sue. For you guys, I just want to say to Sue, Sue, the way to end this is on the top right of your screen.
Okay, yes.
On your phone, there's a little button, I think.
Yes.
That's when you're ready to leave. That's the button you have to hit.
All right. Thank you, Rafi. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Thank you, everybody. It was lovely to see you. Thank you for your comments, and have a wonderful week. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you very much, everybody. Bye, Rafi. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
See you next week.
See you later. Thank you.